Hey guys, welcome. This is my very first podcast. I am recording this through a feature on Spotify. So I'm just working out a little bit of the quirks and hopefully this will go well and efficient. And obviously, as time progresses, things will evolve in the way that I distribute, in terms of potentially adding video, having guests on the podcast. But you got to start somewhere. And so this is where I'm starting. I hope that the audio quality is okay. I'm talking very close to my mic, so hopefully it's not too distracting, but I just want to get comfortable. So, I just wanted to give a brief introduction for those of you who may be relatively new here, who you may not know me. I just want to share a little bit about my story, my background, as well as the meaning of my name, which is C dot. And I think this is a fitting introductory episode. So I was born in 2003. I just recently turned 20 in October. So I'm still pretty young, right? Just turning 20. And I've been making music for a few years now. Now, I was raised on hockey. And I played hockey for all of my life, particularly as a goalie. For anyone who's familiar with hockey, I grew up watching Yaroslav Halak from the Montreal Canadiens back in around the 2010 era when they were in the playoffs against the Washington Capitals, and that inspired me to become a goalie. And then from there, it was Carey Price who was my inspiration in not only hockey but also in life. I tried to model my behavior and my attitude after him and sort of study him. And then during the lockdowns was when things really started to take a shift. So I played up to AAA level hockey as a goalie, played AAA, AA, MD or single A, played house league, played select. I was skating with junior B and junior C teams in Canada. I'm not sure if it's different in the States, could be, but during the summer skating with OHL guys and absolutely loved it. Was absolutely in love with hockey, and my goal was to be a professional hockey goalie. And then the lockdowns happened, and I was doing a good job keeping up with things. That's just the sound of water. I was doing a good job keeping up with things during the lockdowns. I was doing dry land training and staying in shape and dedicating my life to this. But there was so much on and off when it came to the lockdowns, right? Like we would be in lockdown and I would work through it and I would stay in shape and then we would get out of lockdown. I'm like, great, we're good to go again. And then we go back into lockdown. And that happened like 3 or 4 times. And by the third or fourth time, I started to feel remotely discouraged, as I think a lot of people probably were by that point. And I began to wonder, do I really want to dedicate all of my life to this thing that if the premier of my province just decides to do a lockdown, it all gets stripped away from me? And this was around the time where they were having the mandatory vaccines for going to restaurants and for participating in sports, which I don't agree with the mandatory side of that and enforcing that the way that it was. We can have, discussions about all different sorts of things, but that's just my opinion towards the matter. And there was times where I was, on the school hockey team and I was turned away from my home arena that I grew up playing in since I was 3 years old because even though I had a, uh, negative test, like multiple negative tests from the week, I wasn't allowed in because at that point I had not been vaccinated. And so it was, very discouraging, and I thought to myself, if this is where the laws are going, who knows how they're gonna evolve, and maybe God has a greater purpose for me than hockey. And so during the lockdowns, I got an idea. I had been listening to NF and I was like, you know what? If I was to make music, it would kind of be in the style of NF. And so I want to experiment with this and I want to see what it's like to try to make a song and see how good I can make it sound. And so I started looking up YouTube beats and I wrote my first ever full song. I believe it was January 2020. when I wrote my first song. Not very long ago, right? I could be off on the time frame, but it was during the lockdowns. It was, I think, 3 months into lockdowns, I wrote my first song, and my perspective was, "You know what? The time is gonna pass anyway, so I may as well just do something and try something new, and then I can build something that I'll have to show for at the end of all these lockdowns." I'll be able to say, "You know what? Even though the time was really crap during lockdowns, at least I started making music and I learned something new," right? At least I would have something to show for it. And so I did, and I started off just recording on my phone. Sorry, give me 1 second here. And what I did is I would play a beat on my brother's iPad with my brother's headphones, his gaming headphones. And as I was listening to the beat, I would then record into just the regular videos app on my phone, just with my phone speaker. And then I would screen record that same beat on my phone, drag it into iMovie, remember where all of my lyrics were supposed to sit on the beat, and I would manually trim and drag each video, extract the audio from it, and then trim and drag each one to line up exactly with the beat. And I did that for 13 songs. I basically made a full album's worth in the span of probably a year with that strategy. It wasn't much of a strategy, but it's how I started, right? And that allowed me to become familiar with writing, with placement. I didn't know anything about effects, how to add EQ, compression, auto tune, etc. But I just thought you got to start somewhere, so I'll start. And it also sort of trained me to not be dependent on all the equipment, right? It was literally just my raw vocals recorded into an iPhone. So it kind of forced me to do better. I'm not saying that I did do better because you can still hear those songs. They're not very good. If you look at my YouTube page, my original YouTube page, Chris Mackness, which is my name, you can find all those videos. And they're pretty rough. But that evolved into moving into my grandparents' place, and because there was more space, more room to record music and experiment and have some downtime, which I personally like to have. I don't really get bored being alone. I always have stuff to do, and although during COVID there was many times that I was very lonely, I think that there's a difference between being alone and loneliness. And so, although at times I have felt lonely, for the most part, when I'm alone and I have stuff to work on, I appreciate that time, and it gives me time to focus and be present and do whatever it is that I need to get done. But where was I? Yeah, so I got a Blue Yeti microphone, just a basic microphone, right? And I started recording. And I was using my old family laptop, an HP laptop that still had like my dad's and my siblings' files from school projects and everything. And I got plugged in the USB mic. I bought a pop filter for $5 off of a friend of mine, and I like literally screwed the anchor of the pop filter onto one of the shelves in my room, and I'm literally looking at that same shelf as I'm talking right now, and there's this indent on the wood. It's kind of doesn't look the best, but we make do. And I recorded my first song, and it's actually on my Chris Mackness page. It's called Slow Motion Demo, and that was the first song that I ever recorded with what I called an actual microphone, a Blue Yeti microphone. Now I have an Aston Spirit microphone, which is significantly more expensive and higher quality. But that was what I had back then. And I learned it, and I downloaded Mixcraft because I looked up how to record vocals on a computer. I had no idea what the heck I was doing. And I saw a tutorial by somebody named Just Robert, and I listened to the video, and I heard at the end of the video, he said something along the lines of, "Thank you, my brothers in Christ, and have a good one." And I was like, "Oh, this guy's Christian." and he knows how to use this software. And I did some research, and it seemed like that was the cheapest software. It was like, I think, $175 for lifetime use. Very good deal for starting out. And it came with a bunch of stock plugins and everything. I didn't know what plugins were back then. I didn't know what compression was. I didn't know how to record. I didn't know input volume or gain, knew none of that. Zero. And so I found this guy's Instagram page through his YouTube description, and I reached out and I literally asked him, I'm like, hey man, I'm new to this. I want to make music. Can you teach me? And he was like, sure, bro. And so we hopped on calls, long distance, unknowingly. I didn't know it was long distance. I was getting charged for these calls. We're on the phone for like 45 minutes. Bill comes in. I was under my dad's family phone bill. And he's like, Christopher, there's a bill for your phone. I don't know who you're calling in the States for 48 minutes at a time. And I was like, oh boy. So I learned a lot from him. I learned how to record. I learned how to adjust input volume. I learned how to label tracks. I learned like what actually were ad libs, because I had heard that word before, but I didn't really know. I just knew that they were a, and I didn't know the different things you could do with them. I didn't know what stabs or I guess some people call them different things, punch points or whatever, where you add emphasis on certain syllables and rhyme words. I learned about all that, harmonies, different vocal layers. It was so refreshing. And it was a USB mic, so there was zero latency. There was no delay with my recordings. And so I recorded a couple songs and I asked him to mix them for me. And then I asked him to teach me what he knew about mixing. And so he explained things to me on the call. And of course, I didn't know what I was doing. And so I would just say, hey, can you have the song just like, sound smoother? He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, I don't know. It just doesn't sound smooth, you know? And he's like, well, I did this with the EQ, I did this with the compression. And I go, no, but like smoothness. I had no idea what I was talking about. And the first song that he mixed was my song Do You Know, which I recorded a music video for. Absolutely terrible. Um, Again, you got to start somewhere, but it is incredibly laughable and cringe and shaky cam and no color grading, no cinematic border. Like I didn't know what I was doing, and I edited that whole video, and I thought it was phenomenal when I made it, because just seeing myself on the screen, I was like, oh my gosh, this is absolutely insane. Uh, yeah, apparently not. But so I made that song, and you know, as we do, I learned from it, and I made another song called What's Next, and I had him mix that, and somehow miraculously this song turned out to be an absolute banger. And I recorded it over the span of a day in 3 different chunks. And I sent him all the stems and he mixed it, and it turned out great. And then as time progressed, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I can reach out to more engineers and different artists, and I can do collabs." And things just sort of picked up from there. I found Pishko, if any of you guys are familiar with Pishko. I discovered his music through an ad, reached out to him. I was like, "Hey man, you want to work together?" But I didn't really have anything on my page. I was still working on the song Do You Know at this time. And so he sort of was like, "Hey man, you don't really have anything out. I'm not really interested," which is obviously reasonable because I had nothing out. How are you going to collab with me if I've never released a song? And then I released What's Next later on. And after he heard that song, he reached out to me and he's like, "Hey man, I have a song that I would love for you to hop on." And so we worked on a song together. It's since been taken down. It was called For the Lord, but it got taken down. There's a whole issue with well, I don't need to get into it, but sort of a legal issue, silly, stuff going on. And there's a few songs that we're probably going to be working on in the future together. But that evolved, and through him and through just finding Christian artist accounts, I came in contact with Joseph Golding and Preacher Zay, and later on Logan Blessed and Discreet Prodigy, through when I started teaching songwriting online. I taught songwriting online for quite a bit, and I'll probably start that back up again. I just need some more openings in my schedule, and then I will definitely start that up again. I was doing group calls. I met Discreet Prodigy through that, and then he learned very quickly, and we ended up doing a bunch of songs together. And I used to call him my Padawan, but now we're partners in crime. So that's sort of a little evolution of how things evolved. It's all one step at a time. Even the song Lion of Judah, I wrote that song. For any of you guys who aren't familiar, give Lion of Judah a listen. It's a beautiful song. I wrote that and I didn't know how to mix. I didn't know how to properly sing it. I made a rough draft. My rough draft by myself was awful, and I knew I needed somebody else on it. And I was trying to find somebody, and I was going to just release it as it was because I didn't want to keep waiting. I talked to my grandma about it, and she was like, Chris, just continue to pray about it. Don't rush it, and God will provide. And what do you know? One random day, I came across this guy's page. His name was Joseph Golding. And I was like, wow, this guy actually has a very good voice. And it just dawned on me, what if I ask him? He has a way bigger following than me. He knows what he's doing. I don't. But you know what? I may as well ask. And I asked him and I sent him some rough drafts. He's like, yeah, bro, I'll be a part of it. And he sang on that and he mixed it. And it turned out to be the best song on my album. And God provided. And that song is still one of my top songs and is making an impact. And everybody locally that I know knows the chorus to that song, which is absolutely beautiful. You are the lion of Judah. It's just such a great song. And so, yeah, things evolved. I made my second album, Dichotomy, all that stuff. It reflects my life as I evolve as a human being, and I document the thought processes that I'm going through and try to be encouraging and try to find hope in it. But there was, also times with my first album, Fragments, Moments in Time, where I didn't feel hope. And so the first half of that album is very depressing because that's how I felt. And that period of my life was incredibly depressing. During the lockdowns, like no school, no hockey, recently introduced to music, and I made a whole album being in the most apathetic, depressed state of my life. I was such a great student in school, but once it got online, like one of my math classes, I became so apathetic and depressed that I just stopped caring. And I literally left the test like pretty much blank. I had like an over 90% average. And at the end, like I had that 2/3 into the semester, but then by the end I finished with I think like a 72 just because I didn't care. And it baffles me that I felt that, but I did. And that was honestly how I felt back then. I didn't care enough to even consider caring. So I know what that feels like. And it's not a fun feeling at all. It's very, very, very depressing. But thank God that I'm not there anymore and I can contextualize it and put it in its place and address it, but not linger in it. And, still have a healthy outlook and be passionate and excited and absolutely love and enjoy and be grateful for my life, which is the case now. But yeah, I made the Dichotomy album about my wrestling with, sin and my perspective and what I wanted versus what God wanted. And I'll go more in depth in that in another episode. But yeah, one step at a time, things just evolve and you put yourself into the situation to figure things out. Right? I always used to think, oh, I need to figure things out before I start. Now I have the complete opposite approach where it's like, you know what? No, I'm going to start and I'm going to figure it out as I go because starting forces you to figure it out. For example, tonight, podcast, first ever podcast, no idea what I'm doing, but it's like if I start this one, it opens the door. I see what goes wrong. I see what goes right. I learn from it, and then I evolve from there. And that's the same thing that I'm doing with YouTube, with live streaming, with music, with everything in life, right? You live and you learn, and you implement the things that you learn. So I just want to wrap this up and address the meaning of my name, C. Dot. Again, guys, like I said, this is my first podcast, so we got to start somewhere. Hopefully, it's not too disjointed. And I want to sort of keep it to around 20 minutes. But the name C. Dot, my original intention was Chris, Defender of Truth. And it started off as a message. I messaged somebody, I forget who it was, some like influencer in the Christian scene, I guess, I forget. And I shared that I was like a goalie or whatever. And this person said, I look at you as a defender of truth and a deflector of lies because I'm a goalie. And so they sort of use that into their statement that they made about me. And I was like, wow, that's so powerful. I want to identify with that. And so I went on my music page at that time. I started off as an NF fan page, actually. I completely forgot to bring that up. I was called NF underscore lyrics underscore underscore. And I was actually one of the bigger NF fan pages, and I posted everything about NF lyrics, photos, went on live and did song breakdowns. I was like completely anonymous, and then I slowly transitioned that into my music account. And actually on my Facebook, I still have an old Facebook account with the same NF lyrics name that is still technically active. And I mean, nobody really goes on it, but it's still there. So it just, shows where things started. But oh boy, where was I? Yeah. So I went to my following and I was like, guys, what should I make my name? Right now, my idea is DTDL. That was my first idea for an artist name, for Defend Truth, Deflect Lies. And then people were like, come on, bro, that is literally like so overloaded. Nobody's going to care about DTDL. Like, it's just so convoluted. And so we narrowed it down to Dot, Defender of Truth. So, because if you defend the truth, well, then inherently you're sort of deflecting the lies because you're standing on truth. So you sort of narrow it down. We came up with Dot. And then one of my followers messaged me and said, hey, what about C Dot? Because isn't your name Chris? And I was like, oh my gosh, that's genius. So C-DOT for Chris Defender of Truth. But then later I realized the truth defends itself. And me wanting to be a defender of truth is the concept of me wanting to be the hero of the story. And yes, obviously we try to defend the truth, but if we present the truth, then the truth should defend itself. And so I realized that there was sort of a subtle prideful approach of me wanting to be the hero and me wanting to save the world and be this great inspiration to the next generation and this pure person that people can look up to. Meanwhile, I was definitely not perfect at this time. I wrestled with a lot, and that came out in my music at the time. But nonetheless, I came up with C dot. And as time evolved, I realized C dot could also mean Christ, period. And I thought maybe that was some sort of hidden way where God was able to use my thinking and my decision making ultimately for his will. And maybe God was working through the original creation of my name. It's just a little subtle thought, but it was a thought nonetheless. And so I sort of allowed it to take on that meaning as well. So there's sort of a dual meaning. Chris, defender of truth, and Christ, period. Because at the end of the day, what it should all be about is Christ and pointing people towards Jesus Christ. And ultimately, Christ means anointed one, right? Jesus is the person. Lord is, the lordship of Jesus, but Christ simply means anointed one. And so, technically speaking, the body of believers in Christianity can be likened to quote unquote little Christs, not in a blasphemous way, not in a way of we are God and we're going to rule or anything like that, but just in a way of, when you are anointed by God, the like Christ simply means anointed one. And so I thought, you know what? Not in a subverted, backwards, twisted way of some false Christ or, oh, I'm claiming to be Christ. Not at all. It's about pointing people towards Jesus Christ. So that's sort of the second meaning. And that came out in my first music video. Do you know? At the very end, I say, place your faith in Christ. And then it says Christ, period, on the screen as the camera pans up into the sky. And so that's sort of the meaning behind my name. And I try to express that at times in the music. And that's sort of what Dichotomy is about that contrast between me wanting to be the hero and trying to figure things out myself versus just putting my faith in God. So we're at 24 minutes, about to be 25. I think I'll wrap that up for now. I could talk on and on and on. And it's kind of crazy that, just rambling on about my story, I've already spoken for 25 minutes. And this weekend, I'm speaking at an event and I have a 40-minute time slot and then a 20-minute Q&A. Although I believe the 20-minute Q&A may be at the end with multiple speakers. But it is refreshing to know that I'm 25 minutes in, and this Saturday I'm going to have to talk for 40 minutes, and I definitely have enough subject matter that I could talk about now that would get me to 40 minutes. So that's reassuring and refreshing because I was a little bit anxious about the thing that I'm doing on Saturday, just because, it's my first time doing long format speaking. So I just want to make sure that I'm prepared. And I think this is good preparation because it's completely off the cuff. There were some pauses, there was some learning, and that's what this is. It's learning how to articulate myself better, learning how to diversify my vocal expressions. And I still need to make that more of a habit. But regardless, I love you guys. I appreciate you guys. This is just the first sort of, you know, see where things start off for the podcasts, and then we'll see where it goes from here. So I appreciate you. Thank you for listening. Listen to the new album, Dichotomy. Skim through it. The song Let It Out, it's titled This Song Will Make You Cry, is almost at 500,000 views on YouTube, which is absolutely absurd. It's at 490 something right now. It's probably at 491 or so. And I'm releasing a Spanish lyric video for it on Saturday at 3 p.m. And what's the date of Saturday at 3 p.m.? Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 29th. Oh, I don't even know. But December, or the last day of November, I guess. Or no, December 2nd, I think. Yeah, December 2nd. Uh, but I'll leave it at that. God bless, guys. Thank you so much. It's after 10 p.m. here. I got to wrap this up. I probably should have kept this to 10 minutes, but you know what? I started rambling on. So we move. Yeah, so I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much. God bless, and take it easy. Stay tuned for what's coming next.